watching the Mission X overview. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at the physical activities. But right before we go into the physical activities per se, I want to show you how do we train in space? How do we actually do exercise in space? And you will see a few different devices that are used in the International Space Station to maintain our astronauts healthy and keep them fit so they can perform things such as extravehicular activities or spacewalks. They are healthy enough to go and open hatches and do experiments and things like that. The first exercise hardware that we're going to see is called ARED, which is the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. And this is like lifting weights in space. And this allows us to actually get muscles and bones weights. And weights is really good at actually keeping us with those muscles that are very strong, and actually that bone responds to also to that. So it's very important for us. It has a maximum weight of 600 pounds. Wow. That actually you can put in it. So you can see our astronauts really train hard, and not only on the ground but in space. We also have a cycle ergometer, which is basically a space bicycle that we have in there, and we call it CEVIS. And this one, it's actually one of the most reliable hardware that we have, the more reliable exercise equipment that we have over there. And I say that because it never breaks down. It actually has been successful into every day, kind of you go in and pedal, and it's been up there since we actually started flying the International Space Station. And it's good for your cardiovascular system. We also use it to see how fit our astronauts are in some of their cardiovascular fitness. Mm-hmm. So we do some testing with that in space, and it also helps with some muscle as we're exercising over there. The last device that we have is a treadmill, and we actually have our second generation treadmill up there, and we call it COLBERT. The first one we call TVIS, so we have another acronym in here that we talked about, but they're treadmills, just like you will find in the gym next to you. Now the special thing about these devices is that you're floating around in space, so you gotta adjust and have to learn into how to make it behave like you were on the ground. So in each one of those devices that you saw, we have to use harnesses, or we actually have to use some kind of a seat belt, or we have to hold ourselves against the device so that you're not floating down on the ground. Because you can imagine going to the gym and throwing the weights off, and the weights just keep floating. So then they wouldn't be working the same way. So our engineers have worked very hard to add this parts of the exercise hardware so that the machines help us to keep our astronauts pulled to the ground, so it behaves like you're in normal Earth. So little difference here and there, because it's never perfect, because we're in a whole different environment, but it's very useful. And the children really could just imagine how to do the exercise in space that they're doing the Mission X physical activities.
Now let's take a look at the instructor guide. All of our physical educational activities have two guides. One guide is for the educator, and the educator guide, you'll find the space, flight, facts in there. You'll find the materials, you'll find the preparation, as well as the safety, location where you can actually do the activity, what type of clothing you should wear is appropriate for that particular activity, and at the same time how to implement the activity and the challenges that come with it. The second part is for the student. It's usually a one-pager, front and back, and they can actually use it outside. As well, it provides certain information for the student. It lets them know how to actually do the activity correctly, how does this relate to space, and what they're doing, what's it called, and how they can perform it.
So that student handbook can become part of the journal, the student journal, right?
Oh yes, definitely. This is a great thing that goes with the journal, yes.
Excellent. So why don't we go ahead and look at the physical activities that are in Mission X.
Fantastic. Let's take a look first at the base station walk back. In this activity, the main thing you're trying to work at is to improve your lungs, heart, and endurance. And basically what you're doing, if you see the image right here, first you're trying to make sure if they can walk or run 400 meters. Okay. And then little by little you increase it to 800, then you increase it to 1600 meters, and so on. It's just basically get them running and moving around and walking.
And so very similar to the things that we use for our astronauts. We gradually increase how far they run or how far they cycle or how far they do some of their cardiovascular activities. So you can do that with your students. For us in space, it is something that is related to some of the future things that we may be doing. In here, we're going to be doing some planetary exploration, so another surface that we're going to put a spacesuit on and we're going to explore. So we do that by two methods. We actually go into a rover. Those are things that we've seen on TV in the past, and we go around and drive, but maybe it breaks down. Oh. And we need to walk back. So therefore there's the base station walk back. And those are things that we actually are doing here. We're doing a test that is called the walk back test, and that measures and tells us how far can an astronaut walk if their vehicle was broken. So it really relates into space quite a bit. They have to be, their cardiovascular systems and their muscle endurance have to be good enough to walk back 10,000 meters. So that's quite a bit.
Yeah, that is quite a bit. Plus, when you're carrying all that suit. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. Our next physical activity is called crew strength training. As you can see on the image, students here are doing squats. They're trying to strengthen their muscles and bones in upper and lower bodies. How useful is this in space?
So similar to the activity that we have, where we actually are also doing push-ups and squats in there. Mm-hmm. You know, we train like that for our astronauts, and we need strong bones, strong muscles. Exercises that are resistance exercises, such as those that the children are being doing in the crew strength training, mm-hmm. are very helpful for us. In space, we got to move big things. So even though they're floating around, they have mass. So we have to start and stop things. We also have to open hatches, things that may not be that easy to open, and we need to perform our regular tasks, such as experiments and other things that are happening in the International Space Station that will require that strength. Also, while they're on the ground, maybe landed, and there's some things that they need to do to get out of the vehicle, such as what you're seeing on the screen, which is escape from a vehicle, as is done in some of the astronaut training that they do while they're getting ready to go into space. So you need to use your muscles in order to keep that. So you need to be strong.
Great. Our next physical activity is called Do a Spacewalk. Here, the students perform an activity that strengthens their muscular, upper and lower body.
And by doing some bear crawls and some crab walks, we actually are going to be doing some things that are very similar to what we do with astronauts, which is get their muscles strong so they can do things such as spacewalk. Pardon me, and we can also do some intravehicular activities. Mm-hmm. So inside of the space station, we actually are doing a lot of jobs, a lot of things that require them. Experiments, you know, astronauts who are down in space, they got to do things, other jobs. They're engineers, and they're medical doctors, and they are mechanics, got to fix things, move things apart. So it's very important that we actually have muscular strength and muscular endurance. So those are things that are very close to what we actually really do with our astronauts. And you can see the importance for us in space on having that strong muscles again.
Great. So they're actually walking around like bears and like crabs.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Well, let's look at our next activity. Our next physical activity is called Jump for the Moon. Here, students are performing an activity which actually increases their bone. How does that help in space?
Well, you know, when we're in space, there's no gravity. Then with no gravity, we don't use our muscles and we don't use our bones the same way that we do on Earth. Oh. So that after a period of time, in long duration, we actually begin to lose muscle mass, we lose muscle strength, and we lose also bone density. So we're a little bit weaker. And in Jump to the Moon, actually we are jumping on the rope, right? So we're up and down landing. So in our training for the astronauts, we actually do jump training, we do plyometrics, and we do similar things that actually increase bone mineral density and increase your muscle endurance by doing so. So in space, you know, our astronauts use the exercise equipment, such as the bicycle that we have in there, and we use things as our weightlifting exercise machine that is called ARED in space, and that helps us with getting good bones because we don't want them to lose too much bone. We want them to come back and actually be healthy.
Our next activity is called Mission Control. Here, students are actually working on balance and their spatial awareness. How is this important in space, Jamil?
Well, long-term in space, we don't know what's up and down. We don't really use the muscles the same way as we're down on Earth because we're floating around. I can push you and I'm going to float the other way across the wall, and I'm going to move things relatively easy in space. But the thing that happens is that we are not in our environment. We're not on Earth where we have gravity and we actually got good sense on where we are as we walk, as we touch things. So it's as we are in long-term exposure to microgravity, to space environment, we tend to lose a little bit of our balance, and we tend to lose to the part that tells us where in space am I at when I'm doing an activity. And by that I mean, if I'm raising my hand, when I'm raising my hand after space flight, I might think that my hand is higher, my hand is lower, as an example. So we do exercises such as throwing that ball when you're balancing in one leg to actually recover from the exposure of space flight. And that's a reason that we actually work hard at it. We want our astronauts to be walking to their normal jobs, to be doing things that are on your daily living, such as getting up on the sidewalk and so forth, that will help us. So that's a relationship that we have into space in here.
That's why you see them sometimes upside down.
Yes.
And they don't even know they're upside down.
That's correct. So why don't we go ahead and talk a little bit about the next activity, which is explore and discover.
Yes, this is a great activity. And here the students are really performing an activity that improves their heart and lung to become stronger. It usually works the aerobic and anaerobic activity.
So we use oxygen, and we use no oxygen to produce energy to make our muscles move, right?
Right.
And that's very important because our heart, as we do that, it starts beating faster, or start beating even as we put more intensity, more energy into the activity, utilizes that energy, gets that energy that we have without using oxygen. That's what that means. But why is that important? Well, when we're walking and we're doing activities in space, some of them require that aerobic and anaerobic activity. Big example of it is when our astronauts actually were in the moon and they're exploring it, which is one of the maybe planetary surfaces that we are going to go back and explore a little bit more and learn a little bit more about it. So it could be any celestial body that we go visit, and we're going to be on spacesuits and we're going to go and set up experiments. So they might be big boxes that we might need to do very high intensity work to kind of lift it and get it in there, or we might have to walk for a while. Extravehicular activities tend to be about 8 hours in length, and they need to have really good endurance about it. So the good cardiovascular endurance is very, very important as in space. But also when they return, astronauts have to be able to get out of that space capsule, the space vehicle, whatever they're using to get into space, in case there's something that goes wrong. So maybe they need to help somebody or carry some equipment quickly outside of the space vehicle, and that's really important to have good aerobic and anaerobic conditioning.
Now let's take a look at our next activity, called Agility Astro Course. This is actually a fun activity, and we've seen it done in so many different ways. But we're usually working here the agility and improving the movement and coordination and speed of kids. How is this, important in space? Everything is so slow in space.
We might not use it a lot in space, but we use it before and after space to, again, do things such as our daily activities, as walking up and down the stairs. Agility really, it means to get change direction without losing a lot of speed. And we do similar things with our astronaut as we prepare them to go into space. We set up cones, we actually test them and see how quickly they can respond to the obstacle course that we have. And then after they come from space, we do the exact same test. And what that helps us is to plan what type of exercises and how many times we're going to be running those drills such as Agility Astro Course to get them ready to do that. So in space it might be a little bit different. On the ground for us after flight, because again, being in space is not an easy thing, we got to get those type of agility movements really ready to go. So anybody can do that and feel like they're training like an astronaut.
I see, I understand. It's not only important to train before, but it's also important to train them when they get back.
That's right.
That's why it's good. I understand now. Okay. Well, let's look at our next activity. It's called Speed of Light. This is a fun activity because actually students are working on their hand and eye coordination and reaction time. How fast can they catch something? I think I saw something like that. Somebody was doing an EVA and they almost lost a tool. Does that have to do with reaction time?
Yes, we have things in space, right? We're looking at something, we got to quickly react and grab it. So we don't want to lose that tool in space, because how are we going to finish our job? We're going to have to come up with something. So we got to be quick when we do that.
Hardware up there, right?
That's right. But other things, when we're in extravehicular activities, you see a robotic arm, which is manipulated by a person inside of the International Space Station. And what they do with the robotic arm is that they're listening to people on the ground or outside of the spacewalker, EVA's extravehicular activities, or spacewalk. And by those commands, you have to quickly react and stop, or quickly react and move to the other direction. So not only for spacewalkers, but also for people inside of it, is very, very important. And it's essential for a successful mission in the International Space Station.
So let's take a look at our next activity. It's called Astronaut Core. This activity is great because you really don't need many materials, and you're working on your abdominal and back muscles.
That keeps a lot of us in a healthy. We got good posture. We're walking up straight the way that we should be walking, right?
Right.
As you can see us, we're just getting on nice and tall. Well, it's important when you're in space. You actually are not using those muscles the same way. But what we try to do is to keep those muscles strong, so that when we are performing activities, when we're actually grabbing things and moving, like you're moving your torso into one direction and legs in the other, or when you come back from space and you're being exposed to the microgravity environment, the space environment, we actually need to keep them strong so that they don't hurt themselves and they're able to complete all their tasks. They are moving items inside of, they're fixing things, and you really use your core muscles a lot. So similar to what we do on the ground, we go in with our astronauts and we do crunches and we do planks, such as the we'll see in the activities, and those things really help while we are getting them ready to go into space. And again, a little bit harder in space to do, so we use devices, we use machines to help us during that in space, to lift weights. But when we come back to the ground, they're back to doing their planks and crunches.
I guess I just never saw an astronaut actually doing a plank, or I just never imagined that. I thought they would do, I don't know, something more, difficult or something. But it's good to know that even the simplest exercises are important. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's an astronaut or an athlete or just a person.
It's everybody. We should keep a good core.
Our next physical activity is called crew assembly. And this activity is actually lots of fun, and kids actually get to work together as a team. It involves dexterity, problem solving, communication. Those things sometimes we don't see them to be as physical activity because we're actually creating something, putting something, assembling something together. So how does that go along with actually training like an astronaut?
Well, for our astronauts, when they go on spacewalks and when they go on missions, they never go alone. They go in as a team, and we don't only have a team in space. We also have a team on the ground that works together. So it's an activity that reflects that importance of team. As you're conversing, you're having solution discussions. How are we going to solve the problem? So those are things that happen. When we hear things such as Houston, we got a problem, right? That a lot of people talk about. Well, there's a set of people that are going to help doing that problem solving. And in crew assembly, we actually are going to be talking to each other, and they're going to be challenges just like a spacewalk. In a spacewalk, we have this bulky glove that actually does not allow you to feel things outside of the spacesuit quite a bit. And if you put an example, if you grab a working glove and you try to grab and feel how things like maybe a spoon or a fork feel like, or maybe it feels a little different, right? So they have to learn how to use their hands with that glove and have enough strength inside of that glove to actually do the activities. But the other thing is they have to learn on how to communicate with it. We practice all that on the ground also. We have the Neutral Buoyancy Lab, which is a place where we actually practice our spacewalk in and underwater and in the spacesuits that we use in space.
In water?
Underwater, that's right. And we do every single one of the activities in there. And crew assembly mimics that, because we go in there, we put our gloves in, and we go to build a puzzle, and we work together to put that puzzle together. So you talk to one another, teamwork, which is very important.
Next, we'll talk about let's climb a Martian mountain. In this activity, you're working on your heart, your lungs, and as well as you're trying to improve your muscle endurance.
And
would you climb a mountain?
Well, there's people that actually are astronauts have climbed a mountain.
Really?
Yes, we
Do
have
they
one.
train for
There's
it?
one astronaut that have done two things: climb Everest,
Really?
and you'll see a picture of it in a little bit, and have flown into space. It's a little, space fact that is not well known, and that's really exciting for a lot of individuals out there. So it is something exciting. But what do we do when we're in space that it relates to it? As we explore new planetary surfaces or going back to the moon, we're going to have, again, people that are going to be wanting to look at what these mountains are made for. So things that are going to be walking up, using your hands up, as we discovered, do maybe some geology, and we do some exercises that are going to be helping for that. So we are going to be using a lot of our hands muscle endurance. So you see they're related. You want to train that. So we use as our physical training goes with our astronauts, we do use a lot of activities that help us with that. And for future missions, it's going to be really, really important.
Next physical activity is called Get on Your Space Cycle. This is a fun activity because you can just take your bicycle and actually just work on your cardiovascular system and work on your leg muscles, right?
And we have something similar in space that we use, which is we have our space bicycle. It's called CEVIS, and it's a cycle ergometer, and it's built up in the International Space Station, and we use that almost on an everyday basis to keep our cardiovascular system going. And we also use a bicycle on the ground. We have our exercise bicycles that we use, and using a cycle outside of the training facility will also help you with your balance. So if you're riding your bicycle across town or with the park, or as you go into school, you're working some of your core muscles to keep that bicycle balanced. So those are things that are very important, and they're related to our astronauts as we're in space. And again, there are everyday activities that we use with that cycle as we're in the International Space Station.
The next physical activity that we're going to look at is called Planet You Go, Gravity You Find. And here UML students are working and improving their coordination, their core, as well as their arm muscles.
Yeah, that's right. They're using some of the medicine balls. They could use also backpack, or they can use something that gives them an external weight, so we can hold it and we can strengthen the arms and shoulders. And then they're going to be doing some squats and some movements in there that are very important to keep that good core, good strength. And in space, for us, it's really, really important to have a good core, good arm strength, because we're doing some activities out there like spacewalks, and we're going to be carrying things, and we're going to be fixing maybe outside of the International Space Station. So it's good to actually have those good muscles. And as we return to maybe the moon, or we explore even going further to Mars, it's going to be very, very important to have that good muscle strength in the core and using your arms, as we're going to be doing it and exploring quite a bit more. And those are things that we do in our astronaut gym. They actually they lift the weights, and they train. We do medicine balls. We do medicine ball tosses, which are a lot of fun. But we also do those exercises with the quad. And the more that you do them, the stronger you're going to become.
So they're actually training like real astronauts.
That is correct. Training like an astronaut.
Our next physical activity is called Space Roll and Roll. Here, basically, they're working on their flexibility and increase the motion of range. They do somersaults, huh?
They do somersault. They're doing it. They're tucking their head and kind of rolling around. And what that does is that gives you awareness of where you're at in space. So it teaches some of the movements that we have. But in space, one thing that we have to remember is there's no up and down. You're floating up there. So we have to do some exercises that help you locate yourself and respond to what's up and down and get you in. And it's very similar to things that they experience with the astronauts in there. Our astronauts, when they're on the ground, they do some of the training in virtual reality labs, and they put them in different environments that mimics being in space, just so that they feel that. But it is something in space that you will do. You will do a lot of tucks. You see them all the way in the International Space Station when you see them in video, and they're tucking and they're just floating around doing a bunch of rolls, right? So those things are important to know where you're in space. Similar to what you see when you're doing maybe some diving and swimming and diving, or gymnastics where you're doing a lot of turns. You locate yourself in space, and you're able to actually see where you're at and stand up and look up. So those are the relationships that we have with it. So are you ready for the Mission X Challenge? What do you think? You think they're ready?
Oh yeah, definitely. They're more than ready. I think they're ready to pick up their stuff and start going working out.
Well, I think that we should go ahead and thank everybody for joining us into the Mission X introduction and overview. Hopefully, all this material has been helpful for you. We hope that you have a great experience. This is a global experience, and you will see people from all over the world, other children that are going to be participating, talking in their language, sharing their videos, sharing their pictures, their blogs, and we're going to see if we can make Astro Charlie walk all the way from the Earth to the Moon by your performing your activities. So we hope that you have enjoyed it. For those of you that may have any questions with the Mission X webinar, the overview, you can contact the individuals that are in the screen at this time, and we'll be happy to answer the questions and help you out during or any point during the challenge. So we're hoping that you actually come and train like an astronaut, join Mission X here shortly, and we're going to be ready to kick off. So with that, we're going to be signing off.
Bye everybody.
Bye-bye.